year, if you go line by line, the 2017 budget is almost 1,400 pages long. If I wanted to destroy it for us, we could print it out and it'd be 5 inches tall, weigh 12 pounds. I've said this before, it's 71 different sources of funds, and 61 out of those 71, approximately 85% of those funds are earmarked funds and are restricted to be used for designated purposes. Before I get into the numbers and the details and those kind of stuff, I kind of start out with some interesting facts in Baldwin County. Everybody knows that Baldwin County, we're the largest employer with almost 3,700 employees. A lot of people may not realize who's second, and that's Walmart, with about 1,600 employees, I believe, in the 6 locations countywide. We're also the largest food provider in Baldwin County. Interesting fact, during the 2015-2016 school year, we served 3,175,000 half pints of milk to children. I didn't even wrap your head around that.
How many apples did you serve?
I didn't have apples this year. It was like 390 pounds, 1,000 pounds. I use this one again. I'm putting it in a different, equating it in a different way. That our school buses drive approximately 3.4 million miles per year transporting students. Last year, I said that's the equivalent of going from the Earth to the moon 7 times. This year, I decided to change that up. 3.4 million miles is the equivalent of 140 trips around the Earth. So you can kind of wrap your head around that. We cover a large amount of distance transporting students to and from school every day.
That makes sense.
That makes sense now, not better? Okay. That's following the equator. Okay. So you got to be careful where you go. Okay. On your budget book, that the big blue book that you have next to you. I'll give it one. Well, one of the first ones you'll see, and that's the B1A. That is basically our budget summary for this year, and that's what this slide is. For anyone that does not have one of these beautiful blue budget books, we have all 226 pages of the budget summary. And this is a budget summary, and it's by call center, and it's available online in the business and finance page right now. So just as a review, in our budget, we have 5 major funds. And I'll kind of flip back and forth between this slide and the summary. The first fund is the general fund, which is right here. This is where all the operating functions in the school system happen. Most of everything that happens within the school hours will be coded into the general fund. The next fund is special revenue fund. That will be the fund right next to it. This fund type accounts for proceeds of specific revenue sources that are legally restricted to expenditures for specific purposes other than state funds. This would be your federal funds. This would be your public local school funds, cafeteria funds. This is also the half-cent sales tax that's earmarked for maintenance. It would all fall in the special revenue column. Debt service, that's pretty self-explanatory. And capital projects on right here is basically where we account for the financial resources used to acquire or construct major capital facilities. This last one, fiduciary dependable trust, what that is, that's non-public funds that are held at the local school level. That's the fund that it would be accounted for if it's running through the school's books. So that's a quick summary of the 5 major fund sources that are in our budget. All right, we got budgeted revenue 2017. Starting with state revenue, you can see we've got $11.5 million increase in state revenue. I'm going to kind of break that down and show what's causing that. The main reason is for an increase in ADM, and we had an increase in dividers. Federal revenue, I have a star by that, and the stars because we currently have a couple of federal funding grants that are in the application process, and those will be adjusted in the budget amendment when awarded. I'll go in more detail. Local revenue here, this is everything, and then I have a star by that as well too. So note that this includes not only our ad valorem, our sales tax, and your local tax revenue, but this particular figure includes your food service income, your local school revenue, your after-school revenue. That's just where it's classified in our financial statement. And so there are restricted funds that are rolling up into this as well. Other revenue is a very small number. That figure indirect costs. That's basically the administrative reimbursement for federal funds. PCAR rebate, bank interest, those type things would be kind of your miscellaneous other revenue funds there. This is breakdown is very similar to what we've seen in previous years, where we see we're about split down the middle almost, with 46% in local revenue, 45.8% of state revenue, with about 7% of our total revenue coming from federal sources, and the other making up, a very, very small sliver. All right.
Has that breakdown changed much?
No, it's basically been 5 years. Since I've been here, we've been around, 45, 46, kind of split local state, kind of state within that. State about 7%, give or take a few basis points within there for federal funds. So been very kind of consistent over the last 5 years. All right, state revenue. So what does that consist of? It consists of the foundation program. I'm going to go into more detail. I'm going to drill down into that too as well. But we saw a $10 million increase in the foundation program from more students and a increased advisor, as well as the 4% teacher raise being applied to that appropriation. SDE appropriation went down a little bit. I'll get into that. One of the main reasons why it went down is regarding current units. I'm going to hit on that in a later slide. Transportation, this includes your operational and your fleet renewal funding. We saw about an $800,000 increase year over year in state transportation funding. So that was a very good year. At risk, we saw about $100,000 increase in our state at-risk funding. We saw preschool, we get a little bit from the state, that stayed flat. We get most of our pre-K revenue that comes from OSR, and that's for the Office of School Readiness. That's pretty much staying flat, maintaining in the previous year. Capital outlay, we see a modest increase in that. That's the money that we get from the state. That's for buildings and for improvements. Now, they take what the debt payments for our state bonds, they take that off on the front end before we get it, which is about half of the total capital outlay budget there. Other state revenue, this first year that we actually got the Alabama Ahead Act funds. I think this bill has been in process for maybe the last 5 years, and finally in this legislative session, it came to fruition, and that's about $600,000 for technology needs throughout the county that came from the state. I'm going to plan on working with Mr. Kaufman this year, and we'll try to figure out the best way to utilize that, whether that's to offset some of our local costs for infrastructure and those type things. So we'll kind of work through those and maybe move some things around in the budget amendment. All right. Drilling down into the state foundation program, you can see our system ADM, and for anyone that's not familiar with what ADM, that is your average daily membership. It represents the total average daily enrollment during the first 20 days after Labor Day of the previous school year. So it's always 1 year behind. Now this does not include pre-K students. We have over 800 pre-K students throughout the county, and so it's not included in this total. So you can see, just looking at ADM, it's gone about 293 kids if you look at FY 16 to 17. For teachers, now I said there was a divider change. For secondary schools, for middle school, they dropped the divisor 0.5. So it went from 20.2 to 19.7 students per teacher for funding purposes. And then for high school, it dropped 0.5 as well. So it went from 18.45 to a 17.95 student-teacher ratio. Hopefully they'll continue to look at advisors. I think intermediate school advisors are still around 23 students. So if the state's looking to reduce advisors anymore, maybe they can do that in the intermediate school levels that's so desperately needed right now. Also, in the back of your budget sheet, there's supplemental sheets that will show the breakdown for every single school, as opposed to teachers, principals, what they earn, etc. So if you're interested in looking at the schools in your district, it's there in the back part of that budget book.
John, how come the pre-K students are never included? Is that because the state doesn't fund those students?
We get pre-K funding through the OSR grant, the Title I funding, the need the matching provision, except for Orange Beach, when the city paid that matching portion in order to qualify for that. Also, the foundation program was started in 1995, but it wasn't pre-K class in public education. So I really wish that they would include pre-K, especially with Baldwin County. I believe we have one of the largest pre-K classes probably in the state. They would include it for ADM purposes. That'd be very beneficial.
Thanks, John. FY17 ADM, is that pre-enrollment going into the budget?
This is what it was minus pre-K October of last year.
Okay, 2017.
No, this was at 15.
30,329.
Yeah, this is, they use your ADM from last year for their funding. And so that is at 30,329. That is what enrollment was in all, basically 20 days after Labor Day last
Looking at
year.
what we, our first day total, which will be for next year.
Yes. So your ADM will then become,
What subject, but do we know where we started this year again?
Yes, sir.
We started at 30,363, but when you back out pre-K, you take away 574 of that was pre-K.
Sure. And I think it's important to know that these are very preliminary. If you go and you look at the first day numbers compared to our official ADM numbers, they were a lot lower than what our ADM numbers were. So, right. And there's a lot of, it basically smooths out the movement. That's why it's an average over that time period. Where this is an actual count as of that day, our ADM will take an average over a 20-day period after Labor Day to account for absences or transfers and all that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah, I mean, looking at this paper, that's a pretty big increase.
Yeah.
it's a lot bigger than we saw last year.
It's a big factor.
And it's bigger than I think Bill was projecting.
That holds, one of those after Labor Day.
Yeah.
They're pretty stout.
And I think it's, your normal, the schools that you would expect a lot of growth, they did this point. I think we got some preliminary birthday things. All right, kind of moving down the foundation program. So you take the 1,924 teacher, principal, assistant principal, counselor, library units. That comes up to about $95.5 million in salaries. The salary does include the 4% state raise. It was included this year. Next, you can see about $38.2 million of fringe benefits. I'll kind of go through everything that makes up fringe benefits later in a slide. There was an increase in VIA, but there was a small increase, I think, in Tier 1 RSA retirement payments. Other current expense there, what other current expenses that helps fund school support staff? It's kind of whatever's left over at the end of the state legislative process that kind of move over into current other current expense. The 4%, for some of those was probably also included in that increase in current expense there, $32.7 million. Now moving down into your classroom instructional support, dollars, you can see that teacher materials and supplies, that is an amount that's given to every teacher for them to expend in their classroom. You can see it's gone from $373 per teacher to $405 per teacher. Even though this amount right here only applies to your state-owned units, we give that same amount to every teacher, regardless of their state, if they're federal, if they're local. Below that, technology had a nice increase. It went from $64 per unit to $169 per unit, $105 per teacher increase there. How these funds work at the school level is that based on their earned units, we will send each school what they earn. From there, the school will create a committee where they'll elect teachers to represent the rest of the teachers, and the teachers within that committee will vote and come up with a budget on how to spend those funds within their school. Very similar to how that used to be, years ago. We went a long period, probably about 8 years before we had the technology library enhancement and professional development funds. These three funds were allocated by the teacher committee at each school, and that's kind of the state guidelines on how to utilize those classroom funds. Enhancement stayed the same, $21 per teacher unit. Lunch stayed the same, $64 per teacher unit. Common purchases is not funded. And then brace yourself, we went from $53 a student to $54 a student for textbooks. So we had an increase of $1 per student.
And your teacher committee, that has to be documentation if you're
Absolutely. It has to be documented. Basically that, they have to take minutes of their meetings. It has to be an anonymous kind of a process of electing those teachers onto that committee. I mean, they were very kind of specific rules, and I tell the schools they need to follow that and have that on staff in case we get audited. We got audited last year in a couple schools that didn't really follow that process, so we got written up by it. So it's very important that everyone does it. So textbooks, we went from 1.5 to 1.6, factoring in our increase in ADM, and then the $1 increase per ADM. So if you take our ADM and you run through the formulas of what you should get in state funding, it comes out at $169.4 million is what you should receive based on 30,329 students in your ADM. Okay, that's before the 10-mil match. So let's look at what happens when you factor in the 10-mil match. So this is a summary of the two slides that I just went over. So you can see there's your $69.4 million right there. You factor in your 10-mil match, which for 2017 is $36.6 million. That gets you a net 132.8. And so if you check my math there, you earn 169.4, then reduce your 10-mil match, which is 36.6, you only receive $132.8 million divided over a 12-year period. So basically what that means is that we only get state funding for 75% of what we're required to spend per the foundation program law. So we're required to spend 69.4. We only get actual 32.8 and have to make up the rest with the 10-mil match. So to confuse everybody even more, how does the state calculate the 10-mil match? This is a new slide I've added this year. So this is straight off my supplemental report too that I send to the state every year when we're closing out our books. And how they calculate it is that this is when we closed out FY 2005. Now you take your amount of your regular district ad valorem. Now that's regular. I want to say that the 3 mil tax district will not be affected by equity funding. This is regular District 2, which covers 99.9% of the entire county. They do district taxes, to account for the school systems that are, the city school systems that are inside of the county. Reason why they use that particular tax code. So they take that, they divide by the number of mills, you get to the value of one mill, you times it by 10, and there's your $36.6 million that we're seeing this year. So what that means is that the 3 mill regular tax district was assessed in 14, collected in 15, and used to figure the 2017 10 mill match. I know what you're thinking right now. Because it is really confusing because of that lag time. I mean, if you look at the time when it was actually assessed based on the valuation, it's a 3-year lag time comes from that. And, you know, the reality is that this law is now 22 years old. I do think it's time for a review. I think we can all agree that there are things that can be done to improve this law as it was written 22 years ago. So, there's my other attempt at humor. Some of the other state funding, this is what I kind of talked about earlier. You can see there's your big foundation right there. Some of your other programs, you get the school nurse program. You get $976,000 for that. That funds 17 nurses for 45 schools. So you can see it doesn't even meet really what we need to fund. The rest of the nurses are funded locally. We have a nurse at every single school. You can see technology coordinator, the state gives us $35,000 to do that. You go to that salary.
I think we need to renegotiate the contract.
Transportation operations, you saw you had a $833,000 increase. That was the I think when the RAISE Act failed in the legislative process this year, they moved the $15 million that was in that. They moved it to transportation, and they moved it to OC. I think they moved some to pre-K. So that resulted in a nice increase in transportation. Fleet renewal right here. How that works is that you get $6,382 for every single bus that's under 10 years old. We saw a decrease of about $20,000 there. And on kind of my note there, so that's really a kind of a timing issue that we had some buses that kind of hit that over 10-year mark in that year that resulted in less funding. You know, that's one of the things that we've been, I've been trying to get us back on a normal type scale so we don't have a year where we have a ton of buses that may roll off fleet renewal funding. There was a bus lease in 2007. And I think it was 90 buses, and so that was kind of my fear, is that once you get FY 2007, you have 90 buses that would be older than 10 years, which will absolutely impact your fleet renewal. We've invested local dollars to try to get us back on, buying 25 to 30 buses a year type schedule, so we don't have any giant drop offs that will affect our fleet renewal funding. Current units, what that is that is the mechanism that's in the foundation program that's supposed to address growing systems because your ADM numbers are always there behind. So this was what the mechanism that was in there to, they were supposed to take what your ADM would be, calculate the difference between what it would be October versus what we would get funding for, and then in January they're supposed to give you the difference. Now the problem with that is that they don't fund this. It's extremely underfunded, and another problem is that currently in the law right now is that charter schools get first dibs at every bit of current unit dollars, and whatever little bit is left over after charter schools get fully funded is then divided over everyone that's grown. So it's really not there.
So for the handful of systems that are broken statewide, we get clobbered by that. We're really paying for it.
Yeah, for charter schools.
Yeah, we're probably the fastest growing system, so we're gonna pay more for charter schools than anybody else in the state.
The current state, new state superintendent is charter school guy.
Yeah, he's the man.
So we can expect this to probably be wiped out, and then they'll start passing laws and getting funding from other mechanisms and stuff. Charter schools and deliveries. Last year, there was a provision that said all new school systems get fully funded and charter school systems get fully funded. They took out that provision for new school systems. I got in some trouble for pointing out some of the equity issues with us versus Pike Road. Capital purchase is what I'll say again, $5.9 million. I believe we got about 2.8. That's some of our state related debt. So we take the net, and that's the difference. That's how we pay for a lot of our HVAC and a lot of our big capitalized repair projects that we try to do on this facility. I try to use this as much as we can. All right, looking at state funding for ADM, you can.
One quick question. On the school nurses, so we now have a full-time nurse, each school, no more active nurse.
I believe we have a full-time nurse. Yeah. Some schools have multiple full-time nurses.
There's an IT that dictates the child has an individual somehow do a break.
And so we pay, we get less than $1 million from the state, and I don't have the number off the top of my head, but it's significantly more than that, and we cover all of that. So that's been one of the issues with Mobile, is that they try to use their state funding to cover the nurses in Mobile County, where you have maybe one nurse that covers 4 different schools and is traveling around.
We were in that situation for a while ourselves.
I think that does create challenges. We unfortunately enough that we're able to do
Depending
that.
on the age, actually, we travel to much.
Well, I've been in a school where there's a child sick, and then he's sitting in the office, and that wasn't the day the nurse was in that school, so what do you do about that?
If you take our state funding, now this includes your foundation program, your school nurse, your Alabama Reading Initiative, your transportation, your capital, you take everything, and you divide it by your ADM, then this is your state funding for ADM. So you can see that, it hit kind of a very, very low point in 2011, and it's nicely rebound since then, but you can still see that we're $218, just looking at state funding, less per student today than we were in 2008.
You know, that's a great chart, but it's misleading. Because let's say you started at 5260 with just, and I know that, what am I trying to say? Cost of money, inflation, I'm sorry. If you took just regular inflation, I don't know, let's just say it's 2% a year. Where would 5260 be after 9 years?
It'd be a lot if you factor in.
Do you think it'd be 6,500 or? Yeah.
I'd have to look at the best way to calculate inflation to do that.
Because in real, it's just misleading because those are real dollars.
Right.
So we're working on
6286 is what it would be.
6286.
662.86.
6286 with just 2% inflation. 6286 with just regular inflation.
Now, I've done a bunch of per pupil numbers taking, and I didn't know if I had time to do it today. I'm sure it was hard work that he asked for, but using the state report card and using the way they calculate it, we kind of broke it down. Comparing us as Mobile, which is the state average, what's state, what's local, what's federal, looking at like a 10-year average there, or every 10 years kind of thing. So I'm going to go through that. I'll just do that at a different time because I didn't think I had time to hit that, and as well as kind of cover everything in the budget. So, and that's really the best way to frame it, because yes, revenues have been increasing, so is our student enrollment. So, the best way to look at it is to look at it on a per pupil basis there. All right, moving to federal revenue. You probably heard me talk about this over the last couple of months, but if you look at the Individuals with Disability Act, IDA Part B, you can see there that close to a $400,000 drop from 2016 to 2017. Vocational education, that's also called the Perkins money. We saw about a $4,000 drop there. I was surprised with Title I. Actually, to be honest with you, was expecting that Title I was going to drop, and it actually exceeded far more than I anticipated. In fact, it went from 6.1 million to 6.5. million in Title I money. Title I, delinquent and, neglected and delinquent. 26,000, which may not sound a lot, but if you think that you're, went from 105 to 132, that's a pretty big, jump percentage-wise. Title II, that's where we fund our class size promotion units. It's also where we use some professional development money, dropped by about $20,000. Title III is English language acquisition, and that's used to fund our, non-English speaking kind of title schools that are used for English as a second language teachers. Title IV is 21st century. Now, this is a little bit misleading right here. We actually have, is it 2 or is it 3? We have 2 grants, I think, for 21st century that are currently in the application process right now at the state. And so, we're hopeful that we'll get awarded those grants. And Cherry Penn does an absolutely great job writing these grants. And so I'm pretty confident that they'll probably be awarded, and we'll probably maintain 21st century at the sites that we've had it previously. But we just can't include it until we know it's there for certain. Here, this is the USDA. This would be our reimbursements in the cafeteria for our free and reduced lunch program. You can see that that's up about $500,000. That's because the reimbursement rates increased from 2016 to 2017. Department of Defense, that funds half the salaries for our, I believe we have 3 high schools that have an ROTC program. So that covers half their salaries. Other federal revenue, that is closing the gap, and there's another kind of grant, I believe goes to South Alabama that's covered there. What's that? Is that the one? Okay, so I think that's maintaining, and then transition coaches, that's a federal grant run through South Alabama that is being maintained at equal levels this year versus next year. So. All right, going down the list, special education costs. We pay from special education out of the 3 main funds. We use our state foundation funds to fund special education teachers. We also use as much OCE funds as we can to fund paras and those type needs through the state. So this year we have roughly $21.7 million for the state foundation money to be used for special needs children. 6.3 of federal funds. And local funds is $5.4 million for a total of $33.4 million if you look at all 3 of those categories specifically for special education. Now you've heard me mention maintenance of effort, and what that is that we have to meet our local expenditures. We also have to meet our state expenditures for special education in order to receive all your federal expenditures. So what you spend each year, you have to match that in order to receive your federal funds. So you can spend about $27 million to receive 6.3. That was one of the concerns that I brought up, was saying that we had a serious funding crisis. Being able to meet maintenance level does kind of make me nervous, and if you can't meet it, then you have the potential to lose your federal funds. As well as probably get sued by the federal government for about 6 years.
I want to just make a point there because I hear a lot from people out in public that don't understand this, who think that we should be able to survive off what the state gives us, what our state funding is. And what they don't understand is that it's not just the locally funded expenditures that we have to deal with, but we lose federal funding as well. We can't operate. We were never meant to operate just on what the state gives us. And I think that's a misconception.
If you're operating from district state funds, you're operating a very low, bare minimum, kind of scary level. That covers 627 employees.
Is
local budget grown? Or where was it in 16?
It has grown, you know, we absorbed this loss right here in federal funds, we absorbed it locally. So, I know that it's grown by at least $500,000 if you look year over year. You know, I gotta look at the state, we kind of, you know, as we're assigning foundation units to the principals, we let them kind of decide, you know, based on your needs, you decide how you want to use your foundation unit. Kind of deal, so I'm not sure off the top of my head there. This covers 4,263 special needs children out of count from last year.
Is that, what was the count last year?
That is the count last year. I don't have any projections, or I don't have first day counts from this year or anything like that. So I've showed you guys the chart before. I'll show it again. It shows from 2005 to 2016, and it shows our special education student count. So you can see we've had a pretty dramatic increase the last 3 years. I'm not the subject matter expert at all in charts that I just take the data and put it in charts and analytical forms.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Barbara, are those increases at early identification age?
A lot of them are, and a lot of them are transfers in, not only from out of state, but in state. Within the last 3 weeks, we've had a total of, this may not seem like a large number to any of you, but to me it is. As of today, there were 88 in-state transfers. Students with disabilities moving to Baldwin County, from Shelby County, Tuscaloosa City, from Limestone County. And we are identifying a lot of pre-K children. And they come through my office every Wednesday. And if you could see those babies, you'd be amazed at what families are being blessed with.
They're that severe?
They are that.
Let me just ask one more question. We'll go on. I won't take up any more time. Because the only way this is going to reduce any at all is if we reduce identification of special ed students, clearly. My question then is, we have a mechanism in place, depending on the needs identified, the placement of a child, do we have an opportunity to retest, you know, to determine, based perhaps on more current information and specific information, and perhaps better eyes on the test scores and that kind of stuff that we might have in Baldwin County? Do we have an opportunity to retest any of those students under those conditions whereby they may not necessarily be special ed?
Absolutely. And we do that process when children transfer into our system. We look at where they are when they come in state and out of state. Often there are, and as much as I hate to say this out loud, but I'm going to have to, there are many children that may be identified based on what is being done within the school buildings in response to intervention. And we're not strong in this county, in that area yet, but we're working toward that. The state has given no specific boundaries or guidelines in utilizing that process. So school systems and districts have had to hunt, literally.
Yeah.
And that's the general ed side of it, before they're referred. So it's just that's an ongoing process.
That's a very important part of the process, the RTI
Yeah, because it's
process.
costing us money. They're not identified, and yet in essence receiving services and then coming to us expecting them.
It's the old BBSST.
No, we can't, yeah, exactly.
The RTI, but I don't really know, and I haven't got a handle yet, but, you know, I'm sure we will, what is our process, how good are our students at RTI? you know, doing RTI during the year.
Rather than just
And our
identifying.
teachers
these kids.
sometimes misstep and mention to a parent, you might want to have your child tested instead of running it up the flagpole the proper way. And then we're back to the comment.
Yeah, I'm not sure, and I promise this is the last
Well, you
one.
good? That's what it's here for.
I wonder, Eddie, Barbara, if whether or not our special ed teachers understand what happens to us financially. Clearly understand what happens to us financially when they jump to the let's identify, let's test. And you know me as well as anybody else. I don't want to take anything away from a child that deserves it. I would not do that for the world. But if intervention is called for rather than saying identification, then I think our teachers ought to know where we stand financially while they're out there making those decisions. You know, they need to see the figures that you just went over and say, the teachers, special ed teachers, this is what happens when you do this.
And it's not the special ed teachers.
No.
It's teachers in general,
In general.
it's administrators in general. Everyone thinks special education services is a quick fix.
No.
And it's not. If all of our monies are going toward teacher units and paraeducator units, we have no money for intervention pieces. So we're just placing children in a holding tank. And that's not helpful.
We have some
We're
work
just
to
going
do.
to keep going in the hole relative to this, and seriously, as you say, John, in the hole relative to maintenance effort. If we don't get a handle on this, and I'm not sure that the teachers themselves understand the financial impact of some of the decisions. All they do is see a struggling student and they want to get. That's what teachers.
A lot of our administrators
Help
do.
with that.
A lot of our administrators, because they feel like the county provides safety. Well, we might miss a few things, ignore a few things, the county's gonna back us and take care of those things. So we have
County
to work
take back,
here
there's no more money.
on professional development.
Well, then we do such a good job of taking care of those
Yes, we
students. And we
This
choose
is
to fund it,
it's
so
a vicious
people
cycle.
from outside the county get that, and that's why we get transfers in.
Well, I'd say one thing we need to be really careful about, particularly if and I absolutely agree, we need to be careful with identifying students with special needs if they don't have those special needs. But the teachers are already stretched thin anyway, so we're gonna try to do intervention in the classroom and not classify that as special services. We're gonna have to do something to provide those teachers with the resources to do it.
There's
They
a way,
can't, you
because
know,
it's expected,
Yeah, it's expected.
you know, so I do agree, it falls on, but it's a committee, each school should develop that committee, and teachers have the responsibility to submit things to that committee to validate their concerns, and then that committee starts working with the parent and child. It is a process, but it's a process, if you follow, it can keep you out of a lawsuit or mediation or failure to identify those things.
Just Tom, if I could add this to kind of answer Ms. Dalton's question. This summer, the elementary curriculum team had a group of teachers come in, and they worked on the RTI process and the teacher's handbook, and they developed a drop-down screen. So if you're having this difficulty, you can use this, or this resource, or this program that we have. And matter of fact, Dr. Woodman talked to secondary groups today, and they're going to start working on that process. But K-6 has in teacher hand, in the teacher workbook, RTI.
So this next slide is, I saw the last 3 years, and I was like, I want to kind of look at it from a different standpoint, just get off of data, analyst nerd. So what I did is I took the special ed education increases, and then I took our total ADM, including pre-K increases over that same time period, and I was trying to just kind of look at and put it in comparison purposes. This chart, you can see in years where we've had an increase, it's usually been around 12%, 10 to 12% in years where there's been an increase. The last 2 years, we've seen about 50% of our entire student growth made up of special needs children. Like Ms. Dawson said, you know, if this trend continues, you know, I do honestly worry about having the proper resources available to sufficiently address the needs of these students. Because this is a serious upward trend. All right, moving on. Title I schools, you know, everyone knows a Title I school is run by a school with over 40% of the students that qualify for federal mandated free and reduced lunch. Meaning they meet a certain poverty level in order to meet those qualifications. For this school year, we got 47% of our total student population qualifies for free and reduced meals. That represents over 14,000 students countywide. We have 22 elementary schools that fall within the boundaries to receive Title I funding. I've kind of gone from the biggest to the smallest that are in that Title I classification. You can see largest is Pine Grove with 86%, next is Foley Elementary with 80, next is Foley Intermediate School with 76, so on and so on. Stapleton on the other side is 44, Gulfport Elementary is 46, and J. Larry Newton is 46. So this is
that. I know this thing spiked on this total 46.9% spike during the recession. But it doesn't seem like it came down.
Well, if you look at 2 years ago, well, if you look at the numbers that was essentially from last year, but it was from 2 years ago, we saw a spike down to 42%. And the reason was, you know, one of the things Dr. Lee did before he left was all students get a free lunch initiative. We quickly reversed that the minute that he left. Because what happened in regards to that is they knew they were going to get a free lunch, they weren't filling out the free and reduced lunch paperwork. CNP program ran about $19,000 in debt in 1 month, and that's out of high school. So that's really why I seriously thought that we were going to see a decline in Title I funding, because it's about a 2-year lifetime there, and I just knew that was going to catch up to us. That is the reason why it dropped down to 42%. That was, I don't know if you probably remember that, it was in place for 2 weeks, and then the minute that Robbie got in, the first thing we did was reverse it.
It is an amazing stat, 46.9, half our kids.
Yeah. It is. You know, everyone thinks of Baldwin County as the beach and, you know, Fairhope and Eastern Shore and some of the, you know, higher areas. But if you see, you know, so many of our schools just have such a high number of kids that are in that poverty level.
That's the ones that fill out the paperwork.
That's correct. That's what it looks
Yeah,
like.
you have some that don't know what they pay for.
We're not going to do that, but there's something wrong, right?
That's right. You know, I think that, you know, we got their workers, they will make peanut butter jelly sandwiches, and they kind of got an NB to do it, and a lot of times the office staff will fill out everything, so just please have your parent just sign this.
And the high school students, high school students just,
Yeah.
because they have to go with them, or they don't want to be able to embarrass them. So they won't fill them out, they just want to.
So for the second year, we've extended Title I to not only cover elementary and intermediate school, but to cover the middle school that qualify. We have 3 middle schools countywide that qualify for the middle, middle and central Baldwin middle.
There's a lot of these do feel tied to our largest population.
Yes.
Is that the case of central Baldwin middle?
I'm not exactly sure, but I'm sure there is some of that. I don't know exactly. I know Foley gets probably, you know.
Probably without play.
That's where, that seems to be the mecca of where we see the most,
Yeah.
honestly speaking.
Johnny, do y'all have a large Hispanic population in the central Baldwin schools?
Yeah. I would think it's probably all over the county.
Well, mostly I think probably Foley, and I was thinking probably
But where you farming here?
almost like,
But
Some areas a lot more than others, for sure.
yeah, affordability.
That's right.
Going back and filling out the paperwork, you certainly shouldn't make anybody do that. You just make sure that they know it's available, if they will do that.
Yeah, that's all we can do. In schools, I will tell you, unless things have changed, and I don't know, maybe we could address this, but schools where students have the opportunity to be every school again, and you can sign up for free for lunch. Every single child in the classroom gets the paper to take home. Nobody is. If we they get it to every person.
Because I think everything's online, I think, so.
So it's all
That's
on
my understanding, there's not a lot of. Every teacher got a packet,
Right.
and everything's there, and it's handed out to every child, regardless of, race, religion, creed, anything.
Especially if you're one of the schools that's maybe below it, you know, if someone qualifies for all paperwork, you don't want to drop below 40%. And so you can get one thing that definitely need there. All right, child nutrition program. If you look at from breakfast to lunch to some Title I school serve snacks, if you put all that together, you're probably looking at close to 4 million meals served a year over the school year. Have about 220 C&B employees countywide. If you look at the revenue, you can see the USDA reimbursement is about 9.2. Sales is within the cafeteria is budgeted about 3.9. Transfer from general fund, what that is that we can use our USDA reimbursement to pay the salaries of our C&D employees, but we cannot pay the benefits. And so we have to, that's called C&D pass-through, and that's a transfer from the general fund into the special revenue account to cover the benefit costs, which is roughly around $4.4 million a year for those employees. Other miscellaneous state rebates that we can get for some of our first programs and that kind of stuff. Total revenue from the child nutrition program, $18 million for 2017. General fund local revenue. Looking at Avalon, this includes probate, this includes the 12 mil that's on the books now. We're estimating about a 5% increase, that's about 2.6, going from $47.6 million to $50.2 million. Business privilege tax, right under that, staying about the same at about $1.1 million. County sales and use tax, this would be our 2% sales tax, and also the use tax that accompanies that. That's going from 68 to 71 million. Represent about a 4% increase there, or about $3.2 million. Knock on wood, every time I turn on the news, I feel like there's another tropical wave off the coast of Africa going on. Yeah. Other county revenue, what that is that that year we get I think we get about $306,000 for alcohol. That is an alcohol tax, healthy schools tax. I think there's a house manufacturer that's about $20,000. Some of our interest that we make on our bank account. This down here, this 2.7, this is I think around 2 million of that is the after school program tuition they charge from that program, and the rest is Medicaid reimbursements for serving children that qualify under Medicaid. So you can see that brings us to about $125 million local revenue in the general fund. Now, if we back out the 10 mil match that's included in here, it gets us about 89.3. So that gets us a net about a 7 million, or about 8% increase there. Again, a big part of that is Medicaid reimbursements and after school program. We're seeing our 10 mil match go down if you look at last year versus this year. That's because of that 3-year lag time. You got to think it's using the assessment from 2014 that was collected in 15 to today when the property values were still going down. So we're able to see the benefits of that 3-year lag time now. It's going to catch up. And I'll kind of get into that. Looking at Avalon, breaking it up, property taxes versus probate taxes. You can see $2.4 million in 12 months of property tax. That's roughly 5%. About a quarter million increase in probate taxes revenue. That's about a 6% increase there. Put those two together, take the 10 mil match valuation from a couple of years ago, subtract that out, and that's where you get some remaining discretional revenue in regards to your ad valorem. This is an interesting slide. This shows our ad valorem revenue from 2004 to what we project in 17. Interesting to point out that our ad valorem revenue almost doubled in just 3 years. I mean, this is a pretty substantial increase there. A little too fast, and you can see it corrected there. But as you can see, we're still not at our high revenue, high watermark right here for 2008. Kind of demonstrate that here. Even though the Baldwin County population has grown to historic highs, we're seeing our school system go to historic highs. A lot of people are moving in. What we're collecting in ad valorem is still $3.9 million less than 2008. So I know that's a misnomer out there. Well, everyone's moving in. Why aren't you getting tax revenue? This is what we receive. This is what they're projecting us to receive. So that misnomer is just not following fact when you're looking at that ad valorem. Looking at sales tax, I decided to do the same thing, and this is just taking the 1% sales tax revenue for easy comparison purposes. In 2007, the 1% sales tax was bringing in over $36 million. We're projecting that's going to be about $36.4 million for this next year. So you can see, after 10 years, the 1% sales tax revenue is finally expected to exceed pre-recession levels. Okay? Even though we've had record tourism 3 years in a row, we are just now back to 2007 levels in sales tax. So that just shows how far we dropped and how far we've been able to come back, even with all-time high in population, record tourism, etc. All right, good news. We're halfway through the presentation. I was going to say Bon Jovi, but I decided not to go there. We're halfway there. All right, 2017 expenditures. Going back to B1A, this is what we're looking at. Again, we're going to start out looking at everything, looking at all your different funds. So when we look at all of our different funds, we see a total of $361 million. Okay, let me kind of walk through this. We see instructional services at we see that at $165.4 million, a 4.5% increase, roughly 2%. We see instructional support. Again, this includes your state, your federal, your local, all of those type things. Your instructional support, $1.9 million increase, bringing it to 45.9. Operations and maintenance, staying about flat from what we had in our last amendment. Auxiliary services, that's your C&P and that's your transportation. Taking the $800,000 increase in state transportation, taking the increase in C&P because your reimbursement rate has increased. This is what's driving a $2.6 million increase when you're looking at auxiliary services. General administrative services, we're dropping another 1%. We've dropped by about $100,000 when you compare our amended budget compared to 2017. Capital outlay, this is a little bit deceptive here because we didn't actually spend $30 million in capital projects last year. We had it in the budget. We got held up by the State Building Commission, so we were not able to get started on a lot of projects as soon as we thought. And so we're going to have $22 million that's going to roll over. This should have said 16. Just saw that. So we're going to have $22 million rolling over to 17. If that makes sense. So that amount that was not spent, so just because it was there doesn't mean that it was spent there. So debt service, this is a big one. No computer debt, none for 2017. That's a 20% drop, or $4.4 million if you look at debt service as a whole, and computers is a big reason for that. Other expenditures is after school and pre-K. Well,
What did you say anytime, I know, so keep that, what was the percentage, you said 20%?
we've seen a 20% drop in debt from, from this year to 2017.
So we bought the Chromebooks outright.
Yes.
So we won't have any lease payments. How long do we expect those Chromebooks to last before we have new debt service on?
I think they have a 3-year warranty on them, I believe. So we know they're gonna last at least 3 years, and they can be replaced. That warranty was included in the purchase price.
Are we setting aside a certain amount, let's just assume, if we assume that we're gonna replace them in 3 years, and the total cost was what, like, I think it's like 6 million, is that what?
Yes.
We're budgeting approximately 2 million a year, or we're not worried about that, right? I mean,
Well, we're gonna kind of see how this school year goes. If we see a lot of machines breaking, we're gonna kind of evaluate kind of how they do this year, and then that'll kind of drive what we need to kind of earmark in future years to be able to kind of know what we need to do on an annual basis. And we'll say, well, are they gonna do small part 3 years, or are they gonna go 4 years? I think in that first year data, we kind of analyze, and then from there, come up with a plan to make sure we have the funds available for when we do need to replace.
I just didn't want to see our build as you go plan drop by $6 million every 3 years.
Right.
Yeah, because we,
Sure.
Backing up to instructional services. Does that increase, or what portion of that increase are pay raises?
I would say, I don't know the percentage of that, but I would say a good, I would say a good amount of that probably is pay raise. A good amount of a lot of these things is starting with the 4 and 2% pay raise. I don't know the exact breakdown. I can find that for you and do it in the second budget hearing.
Another question would be, has our per pupil ratio changed any in this budget?
Per pupil ratio there. I don't know if I computed it using this budget, but I will. Always have a hard time trying to bounce back to the same of this. Pull it using that same percentage.
My speculation is,
I will show you this. This will probably answer some of your questions, okay? Okay, here's our breakdown. Instructional support, 58.4% of our budget, followed by operations and maintenance, followed by capital, followed by auxiliary, debt service, general administrative, and other. Now, I think this will go back to your question, Mr. Stallworth. The best way is to put this into perspective and look at where our budget is compared to state average. So that's what I did here. These are using the 2015 actual data to get state average amounts. So you can see red is Baldwin County, blue is the state average. So you can see instructional support, we're at 58.4, state average is 61.9. You can see operations and maintenance, we're at 11.3, state average is 8.4, that's about 3%. Over and above the state average. I think that's just the nature of where we live in a very hot, humid area that's surrounded by water in a lot of places. Auxiliary services, I mean, these guys do a tremendous job, running a very, very efficient operation. And as you can see, the state average is about 11.6, we're at 9.9. So we're about 1.7% less than the state average for auxiliary services. Debt services, state average is 6.4, we actually dropped below the state average at 4.3. That's from refinancing bonds when it looks like that would be whenever we can. Plus the no technology leases there. You can see we've kind of doubled our capital outlay. If you look at the state average, about 5.5. We're at 11%. That's the way to go. Now you've got to put in perspective that this is state average, and this, if you look at the population growth in the state, it's declining as a whole. So, yeah, it's state average, but they're not nearly facing the growth challenges that we're seeing.
Our problem was, John, that what we're making payments on, when if we don't have any more debt, when will it pay out?
I got a slide just for that.
Oh, you got one more?
I just, to speak to Mr. Tyler and just express my concern. We are making some cuts. But we are not putting that money back into teachers, additional teachers. We're needing, and I'm asking the question and just expressing this. But where I'm going with that instructional amount is, are we taking any of that money that we're not spending on, computers and such as that, and putting it back into teachers, hiring additional teaching units for these schools? Because my speculation is we're just leaving it where it is.
Can I answer that? I don't think that's a perspective, because we're growing, that our state funding is always a year behind. And so, we've got a larger number of locally funded teachers than a lot of these other school systems do. It's just that we have to use those locally funded units to get back to even, because the state funding is always a year behind. So yes, we are putting a lot of money in there, but part of that is just to try to, we're having to put over and above what a lot of systems have to do, because we're just trying to get back to that break-even mark.
I get that. I know we talked about locally funded units. You got to be very careful about that. But I'm still asking the question: is
when there's a need, we are responsible, but I'm not front loading. So if you have a lot of principals in May and say, this is going to be my population in August, I need another unit. I don't give them that unit ahead of time, because a lot of times it doesn't pan out for the population in the classroom. So right now, when our numbers start coming in, we've all said talk about it. If there's a need to reduce class size with additional units, locally funded, we'll do, I do. But I don't ever go ahead of the curve. The principal says, oh, I've increased, I need 2 more units, but then the population doesn't pan out, and then all of a sudden we hire those teachers, and we didn't need them. So as far as your question about, are we just sitting on the money and not putting it back into our schools, I would say no. Unless there's something I'm missing. Anytime there's been a request, we're doing our best to meet that request.
And there is money in this budget that will give us some leeway to evaluate class sizes when we get some more firm enrollment numbers, and we see schools that have.
I mean, are you hearing that maybe we're
Provide
not
more local funding?
giving back to the schools?
yes, but only a little bit. That's not my concern here. I feel like we made a decision back in 07, 08, before I came. We reduced the number of teachers, we increased the class sizes. And my assumption is we're leaving them where they are. That's the new norm. Even though all of a sudden, we've had good years with sales tax and such as that. We're coming in with additional revenues. But we're not growing or reducing the class size. And that's a concern that we can't, and to take that a step further, we can't fund all these new schools on the backs of not enough teachers. So
I can't speak to what happened after. I can speak to what happened in 2007, 2008. The bottom fell out. We all know that. There was a reduction in force, because the funds weren't there. Our system was the highest system in the state. How many locally funded teacher units we had? It was probably upwards of 300 or 400 locally funded teacher units, and more of classified staff was locally funded. So there had to be tremendous cuts, reductions, and you can see how long it's taken to get back. But I'm all for giving schools units when the numbers dictate that, when there's hard numbers. But even in Eufaula, when they wanted to say, I need 3 new units, I waited until our numbers came in, and then if they needed it, we would give it to them. So if anybody is saying, and I don't know, I'm sure they are, because as a principal, I never had enough. You get what I'm saying? But, no, we're gonna put the money back into the schools. I don't know if we're putting it in our capital
Well,
project.
you know, if you look across the state, everybody's student numbers are driven by state dividers. We get 1,900, state-funded teachers. And so, if state dividers continue to stay high, I mean, even if we dump all of our pay-as-you-go funds in order to reduce that, it's just a drop in the bucket. It's not going to be able to really make the impact, I think, that you're looking to make, because it just follows your state funding, it follows your divisors, and it follows, and that's just how it is in Alabama.
Increase in population in terms of students, it offsets anything we're trying to do.
That's right.
Because I think what's happened is that money has flowed into other areas. I mean, the divisors went up after that. We got the sales tax, and the divisors went up. So then all of a sudden we had to, in order to stay even, we had to fund the teachers that were there so that our classroom taxes didn't go up. Then we had capital outlay. We had capital improvements that we weren't getting funding for, so we had to start putting, siphoning that money off into buildings and maintenance and things that we. It just seems like every time we get a little bit ahead, that the money that we could be putting into classrooms to make the classroom sizes go down, something else doesn't get funded, and we have to funnel that over here.
Yeah, I don't want to chase rabbits here, but the sheer fact of it is, our principals, when they schedule teachers and schedule their classes, a lot of times the curriculum teachers that don't do extracurricular activities wind up with heavier loads, because it's just human nature. They're going to get in the teacher/coach, and that coach is not going to be carrying the load that some of your regular curriculum teachers do. And then at the end of the day, you've got so many teachers off, and then the classes get heavier with those teachers that don't do anything. I'm not saying that's the sole reason, but sometimes our principals have to be very cognizant of how they build their schedule and the workload they're giving to particular teachers. That has a lot to do with it too, but they're not going to have an initiative. And I know it firsthand. So.
I would like to see at some point the per pupil ratio where it's gone since 07 here in this county. That would tell me something. That would tell me why we're down, and are we appreciably changing it?
Yeah.
I think it would be nice too to set a goal as a board of, the state gives us what 19, or one teacher for every 19 students in the middle school, I believe. I don't remember the exact divisor. We may say as a board, no, we would rather that be, say, 17 students per teacher. Now, we may not be able to achieve that with the budget at hand, but at least we know where we're going with it. Because I said last Thursday night, and I'll continue to say it, that I believe that one of the most important things we can do is lower class sizes. So if we have a goal, when we look at the enrollment after 20 days after Labor Day, we know what each teacher has. What do we consider too high? It may be 24 students per teacher, or maybe 20. It would be beneficial to me, or I believe it would be beneficial to the board, and it would certainly help me if we were able to set that goal so that we know so we can set that priority. Now, we may not be able to achieve it because we don't have the money, but at least we know what we're shooting for.
And it goes back to setting goals, what we want to do as a board and superintendent, what our priorities are. And John has said many times, all you have to do is tell me what your priorities are, and we can put the money where we need it.
We can't do everything.
Yeah, well, you can't do it in that way. You take capital improvement. If we spend $10 million on capital improvement, that's $10 million spent. That's not down the road, 10 million next year, 10 million next year, because once you hire teachers, that's going to be in the budget from then on.
That's right.
And when the state says it's not important about class size, and that's the way they fund, then you have to run along those same guidelines. You can set goals all you want to, But if they're not gonna be attainable by funds, I don't care what goals you set, you're not gonna meet them. But anytime you take on more debt that's in the teaching part of it, it's gonna be with you from now on until you have to lay them off when funding causes that, and then that day you back in that rift, and you right back where you started again, which is typical of what the state of Alabama does with education. So they just go through periods of it gets a little better, and then it gets worse. You know, and that's been the whole time with me anyway, since I've been in it. So,
Yeah, I agree there.
I mean, I'd love to help
We can
small
look at
plants.
those things, John, we can come up with some of those ideas and numbers.
I think David has a good point. I mean, if you don't have a goal, then you're never gonna attain them. So the money's always gonna go off somewhere else, but if we, and that should be based on data, where, you know, for a first grade class, what an acceptable and the ultimate student-teacher ratio is, and at least we can strive for it.
All right, taking all funds and fund sources and looking at it by the category of expenditures, you can see about 65% of our entire expenditures is salaries and fringe benefits, followed by about 12% is capital outlay, 10% is purchase services. Kind of a reminder of what some of these things are. I have that in the next slide here. Personnel services, that's pretty self-explanatory. Purchase services, what that is that, you know, this group, and this is how the state requires us to classify everything. It includes costs of services which by nature to be performed by persons or firms with specialized skills or knowledge, or services performed by below school employees. What are those? Those would be your, you know, professional development. That would be
The 7 Habits training, the leader in me that our schools are going through, a lot of that is done through purchase.
that'd be purchase services. That's exactly right. Legal fees, audit fees, building repair, insurance. You know, I'm going to kind of show this on the slide, but a giant chunk of this is utilities, the power bill, the water bill. That's actually considered purchase services. Materials and supplies would be anything that is consumed, worn out, or deteriorated through use. Anything from books to computers to paper towels to food in the cafeteria that would fall under that classification. Capital outlay, those would be acquiring fixed assets that make that capitalized level. All right, I did this for the task force last year, and I thought it was, you know, they kind of had some insights on kind of developing this analysis. I decided to continue it because I think it kind of puts everything into perspective now. These are budgeted expenditures from local tax revenue. What's local tax revenue? That's our 2.5% sales tax. That's our 12 mills. That's the miscellaneous county taxes. What is not local tax revenue is that's not food service income. It's not the after-school program. It's not Medicaid reimbursements. It's not any type of fees or fundraisers that may be classified as local on a financial statement that are generated at the local school level. So that is not what I say when I say local tax revenue. So just taking those big things, mainly ad valorem and sales tax, and looking at where that money goes. I'm going to go through each one of these categories, but you can see, you know, purchases, $37 million personnel, $37 million for services, 24, material supplies and equipment, 5.3. Debt service, 16, transfer of capital projects, 15, miscellaneous, and then the 10 mil match. For a total of about $134.8 million of looking at expenditures from our local tax revenue. Looking at in a chart, you can see that right off the bat, 55% of our total tax expenditures are 10 mil match in personnel here. You also want to put it in perspective, if you do have a serious funding cut, 10 mil match, and look at that service can't be cut. So right off the bat there, that's about 40% or about $52 million that literally cannot be cut if you're in if your funding declines there. So what's in these categories? Looking at personnel, I'm going to go through the penny sales tax and that classification. But if you look at salaries and benefits, including long-term salaries, we're looking at about $30.3 million. CP pass-through, I've explained that, that's $4.4 million. Supplements and stipends that's given to current employees, this is everything from athletics to band to even some instructional ones, that's 1.7. And then short-term substitute costs, we've got about $650,000 budgeted in there to cover those locally funded units and their annual days off. So that makes up the $37 million there. Jumping to purchase services, you can see that roughly 83% of the entire balance of purchase services is made up of three things. It's made up of insurance at 1.7. It's made up of utility bills. This also includes about $750,000 a year in portable, the cost to rent the portables each year. Maintenance repair services. These three alone is about $20.4 million, which is 83% of all of our locally funded purchase services. We've got legal up here. We also have purchase services related to copy and postage and printing and just kind of miscellaneous things. Purchase services also travel. You got countywide, in-district, in-state, and out-of-state travel here. You also have some professional development funds. You have some of your IT, your data processing, your internet, your infrastructure costs of about 1.2, plus some of your non-instructional software from your online registration to the accounting system, to our HR system, to the time clocks, plus some special education purchases, where they kind of outsource certain people to help with special needs children there. So that's purchase services. Materials and supplies is next. Instructional supplies, about $500,000 of this is additional textbook funding over and above state funding. Plus you've got instructional and non-instructional costs. You've got instructional equipment. You have your IT equipment. This 1.5 right here is the majority servers and switches and all of those fun things. You have testing supplies on about $31,000. You got nursing supplies at close to $60,000. You've got some of your non-instructional equipment, furniture, that kind of stuff is also kind of included in some of these things. The time clocks will be included. Admin supplies. Interesting thing, if you look at materials and supplies, you can see that $3.1 million out of your 5.3, which is roughly 60% of all your locally funded materials and supplies, is janitorial supplies and it's server IT supplies. So the biggest things in there are, providing the necessary materials and supplies to keep the schools clean, and then providing the necessary infrastructure to keep the schools wired. This is some registration fees. That could be for professional development conferences, etc. Also, this is what the county gives to each school for materials and supplies related to their athletics. We give them in high school and middle school, related to band and choir. We give band and choir in high school, middle, and we give choir elementary, middle, and high, and whatever schools have a choir equipment there. We also started last year giving $15,000 to the North and South Center for Technology because they didn't get some of the CIS money from the state because they don't technically earn state units at those honors. So we've kind of supplemented some materials and supplies to go to the tech center as well. That's close to about $500,000 there. So that is kind of the breakdown when we're looking at our local tax expenditures. So, transfer to capital projects, that's funded the pay-as-you-go, debt service, I'm going to get into that. So you can see there's really not a lot of wiggle room. So when you think of the prospect of losing the 1 cent penny sales tax, when you go through what you're spending from the local tax revenue, trying to find $40 million out of this is going to be a very, very difficult task if it comes to that. Speaking of the penny sales tax, I showed the $30.3 million in salaries and benefits. Kind of, if you look at that and who's noted with the penny sales tax, you can see it's 172 locally funded teachers, it's 18 counselors, it's 12 assistant principals. Other certified employees in 21, that would be your certified directors, your coordinators, your consultant teachers, et cetera. You can see you have teacher aides and paras also coming from the penny tax. You have clerical, I've kind of grouped them. You have your bookkeepers, your registrars, your secretaries, your kind of clerical employees. We have 98 of those. Your technical, that'd be your IT technicians, that'd be your nurses, your social workers, those positions that have kind of a technical aspect to them. That's about 39. Maintenance, looking at your custodians, your plumbers, your painters, your HVAC repair guys, those type of things. We're looking at about 75. We're looking at 53 bus drivers over and above what the state gives us, is what we fund locally. Other administrative positions would be your classified directors and coordinators, such as myself, Ms. Kaufman, Ms. Hyde, those type of positions. It brings a total of 535 people budgeted, funded from the penny sales tax for 2017. Add that with the extracurricular and athletic supplements here at 1.7, you get about $32 million from that penny sales tax. That's specifically salaries, benefits, or supplements to employees.
I don't know the employees that we have who are not state funded. Obviously, we have at least 535 employees that we're using the penny tax for. Do we have any other employees that we're using other funds, such as the other 1.5 cents of sales tax or 2 mills, property tax?
The way that this is done is that, no, we're not using the half-cent sales tax for maintenance for any personal reasons, and that's because the majority of it goes to pay utility costs.
Or the other 1 penny or the 2 mil. I mean, basically, are all locally funded units shifted over into this penny tax category?
They have them.
Okay.
Not to say they couldn't be, the reality is that we also think that we would have to look at everything and shift things around to the best of our ability.
Well, and the reason I ask is because I know that since we've had the penny tax, we've built up this capital improvements fund, and looking only at this and not considering other revenues, the numbers don't add up, and to save the amount of money we have saved for our Build to Go program.
And I'm going to go into really how we got there. Cecil asked that. But to answer that question, if you go back to this includes everything. This includes the regular 1 cent. This includes the penny sales tax. This includes the half cent. This includes every local amount of revenue. So if you have your funding cut, you're going to have to shift all in between what all of these revenue figures bring in.
Right. As of right now, the personnel portion of that pie is covered by penny tax only, not by. Okay.
Okay. This is our penny tax timeline. Looking at kind of now where we are right here and then going into 2019. So first of all, we'll start out, you can see that, the first thing up is the 2017 legislative session, which will start in February and probably end sometime in May. There's a lot that has to be done in order to get the local act passed through the legislative process. We want the bill must have a sponsor, it must be written, it must be advertised. And I believe that it needs to be unanimously passed by both the House and the Senate. All of those things combined is quite a task to achieve. So what this is that if we get through this legislative session and there's no local act that goes through, what's our timeline there? So you'll see, as we're building, if nothing happens in 2017, we're going to need to start planning for this day right here. And this is May 2018. We're going to have to start planning in phases. Basically what we're going to have to do, this will be in the June of next year, if nothing happens in this session, at budgeting our 2018 school year, knowing that we're only going to get 8 out of the 12 months of sales tax. We're only going to get this chunk and not the remaining in 2018. That's about a $13 million less in funding that you're going to have to account for when you go into FY 2018. So if nothing happens in this legislative session, I think we need to start planning for this date right here. And so the first thing we would do is that probably starting in June, first of all, when I get through this budget, get through my year-end budget, I think that, me and Mr. Collins staff will start creating a plan on planning phase one cuts. These phase one cuts will be $13 million that will go into effect in 2018. We're in 2018, legislative session will start here. It's really, the legislative session could go right up to when the penny tax expires, and so, there's no way that we can wait. So we will have to start planning phase two cuts. The phase two cuts is when we really start cutting into the bone. You'll see that at that point in time, we'll need to cut an additional $27 million in cuts to bring us at $40 million total. In FY19, that $1 million that we lost, that goes away. So you have a loss of $36 million in sales tax revenue and $1 million in ad valorem. And sales tax revenue will probably be higher than $36 million in 2018 as well. Especially, you have the Amazon tax that I'm sure is going to the 8% statewide tax. I got to get with the county commission and try to get a full understanding of how that will be applied to us here. But I think that one could drive the sales tax and that kind of stuff. So $40 million, I think, at the very least, it'd be $42 to $45 million in this time period. So that's where we are. There's no legislative action. If there is a legislative action that says we're going to bring it to a vote, what does that look like? Okay. The way that kind of we understand that this could happen is that it'll be different than in 2012. In 2012, when the sales tax was voted on in November, but no matter what the outcome of that vote was in November, we knew that we were going to continue to receive that funding for the remainder of that school year. So it was in November, but we knew no matter what happened, win, lose, or draw, that it was going to be on the books till May. The way this is stacking up, it doesn't appear like it's going to be set up that same way. What happens there is really not a good situation any way you look at it. So you have your first kind of public election would be here in June, that would be the primary, and then you would have your general election in November. So what would happen if they said we're only going to extend it from here till November? So we're only going to extend it to the date of the referendum. Well, in order, when I'm building my budget in this time frame right here, we were going to just account for getting 1 month of sales tax revenue. So in order to get a balanced budget, in order to get the state approved, we would have to start risk cutting before the voting even happens. If that's what looks like it could happen. So, you can only budget revenue that is going to be there. So if there's a chance that it could lose and fail, we've got to plan worst case scenario.
Then even if you get it, say you have to go into RIF and start cutting, and even if you get the penny tax renewed in November, you're going to have a hard time going back and hiring them back in because they've already gone off to get another job.
Hiring everyone back in the school year, which will cause a tremendous amount of disruption. So, I hope we can come to a compromise with our delegation and the county commission to avoid, potential big disruption in funding in the 2018, 2019 school year. So,
I know we have no control over our revenues. Every year it becomes more evident. Unstable funding creates this kind of havoc year after year after year. Isn't it to us more important that whatever's put on a ballot, that there not be a sunset on it? I mean, it's even more important than the dollar figure?
having stability gives us the ability to plan, gives us the ability to be efficient and plan, do our job to the best of our ability. Until they can give us that stability, then what do you want to do?
Yeah, I get that, but I just think going forward, when we start communicating to our employees, that has to be part of the conversation. Not only that we have a vote, but that sunset's not there. This is perfect financing that our school system needs from now on. Just- Every time I see 5 years, 10 years put on something, just throw it down, somebody else is gonna be fighting something else. Okay.
But you're right, it needs to be part of the discussion.
It needs to be
because everyone
part of the
needs to understand
discussion.
This doesn't fix it.
Yeah.
It just prolongs the problem.
Yeah. Those same employees that we're talking to, are gonna be part of this next time, and part of the next.
These battles are way down. You know, I guess in my 4 years here, that's what
I
today.
can tell you that everybody that I speak in front of, I just refer to it as many factors, the elephant in the room. About all the wonderful things we've got going on, I do always circle back, but everybody's got a little bit different delivery. I do circle back with, we're in jeopardy of losing $35 to $40 million in May of 18, or now I say the new timeline is November 18. And I tell them what has to happen. We either have to look at laying off before we go into the 2018 school year, 17 school year, 18 school year, or we wait until Christmas time and lay everybody off. But it's gonna happen if we don't get help. So I do couch that to everybody. I got a group I'm speaking to this Friday, a business, I'm tell them the same thing. You know, I tell our factories, I tell everybody I speak to, this is real. You know, this is made up, no threats. You know, and the way we me and John talk about stage 1 and stage 2, and I know Mr. Carr, you say, well, we need to see these things. Well, we get through this budget and look what we got, and now we know that $13 million will be bringing you over the course of the year of how we're gonna have to go about realizing, you know, cutting $13 million. And that's gonna be made public, and that's, I mean, I don't believe in hiding that.
And people's argument always is, and people forget history, because the argument out in public always is, this was supposed to be a temporary tax. Yeah, we were also supposed to recover from the recession in 3 years, and we were also not supposed to have an oil spill, and we were also not supposed to lose $1 million in ad valorem tax. So, you know, that argument's out there.
And all of that to keep up the growth.
Right.
You know.
And on top of that, we didn't know.
You know, there's kind of, the discussion needs to start now. You know, we got another study session coming in. All right, this is looking at all of our almost 3,700 employees, and it's looking at by the number by funding source. So it's looking at this top is state funding, it's looking at foundation, 1,924, looking at nurses, looking at state transportation, looking at the reading initiative, which got cut a lot this year. We've kind of talked about that in the summer meeting. Looking at what we're using for state OCEs, funding 500 support people. Some of our state and other of pre-K and after and some of those things is funding about 25 people. Looking at federal programs, we're looking at IDA Part B funding 120. Title 70, CNP, 220. Your ROTC teachers here is other, 415, and then you're going down to sales tax funded or locally funded employees down 535. Bring our total to 3,693. This is again back to one of my favorite charts. I started to put enrollment estimates, but I stopped. And that's really because so many factors that we've seen, and I know I mentioned to you last week that Mr. Harvard entered over 1,300 new addresses into the GIS in the last 2 months. You know, we don't know how many of those are in-county moves, but we know that's a whole lot larger than what we normally have seen. We're seeing very large, you know, increase looking at the first enrollment day of school. So because of that, I decided to pull off a little bit until we got a firm number. But you can see this is historically where we've been. You can see we'll move closer up to 3,700 in our employee count, and you know, including pre-K. I think you know we probably need to expect a 500 to 600 student increase. You know, if all things stay the same for this school year. Looking at employer benefit costs, these are the fringe benefits. I want to talk a little bit about that. PHIP went up from $780, and this is what the board pays for each employee. This is not the employee, this is the employer side of it. So the board pay goes from $780 to $800 a month for PHIP coverage for every single employee. So it's going from $9,360 per year to $9,600 per year. We saw tier 1 and tier 2, I'll kind of explain those. We saw that just go up a little bit, and like I indicated, I'm going to kind of stay the same. Total fringe benefit cost for 2017 is about $65 million for all of our employees. That is 30% of all of our general fund expenditures are fringe benefit costs. Looking at PHIP the last 20 years, this came from the legislative fiscal office. You can see in 2008, the board paid $200 per month per employee. If you look at 2007, it's $800 per month per employee. That's a 300% increase in what we pay per month per employee since 2008. I did say 300%. Let's not get my jokes.
You're laughing.
It's not funny. It's just, and that's probably why. Unfortunately, I don't think that this trend is going to stop. There's no indication that we're going to see healthcare costs go down. I think we're just going to continue to increase, and the more it increases, the less that we can provide, because it takes us more to just provide the current units that we have right now. That makes sense. So, it's the more to maintain.
I mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again, and I don't even know if we can legally do this, but we have 3,700 employees, I think, it was earlier in the presentation. It's a lot of employees. I don't know, my assumption would be that we probably couldn't, but it may be worth looking at trying to broker a deal with Blue Cross Blue Shield rather than going through the state PHIP program. If we're allowed to do that. But
I don't know if we're legally allowed to do that. To be honest with you, I think the state as a whole would have much more negotiation power than we would as a county.
well, one would think, but they've gone up 300%.
Blue Cross gone up 600.
Yeah, I mean, like that. I mean, it is legally possible to do that. We may not save any money, but it may be something interesting to look at to see if we should take a look at it briefly, see if it's something that we should pursue.
I know that nobody's ever done that, so I'll have to look and see if we legally can or not. I don't honestly know.
Hey, silly question, what does PHIP stand for?
Public Education Employee Health Insurance Plan.
Okay.
There you go.
Anyone know that?
I did, because I talk to them all the time.
And I'm going to go into the employee increases in another slide. Looking at what we pay for retirement, this is also showing a 20-year history. You can see in 2000 we were paying roughly around 6% for each employee. It's bumped up. Now we have 14. They restructured this into tier 1 and tier 2, and those rates have increased. Now, for those who don't know the difference, tier 1 employees would be any employees that were hired before January 1st, 2013. So, everything would still apply to kind of grandfathered into the old rules. Now, tier 2 is where it gets different. This would be any employees that are hired after January 1st, 2013. So, vested tier 2 may retire after completing at least 10 years of service at the age of 62. So the difference there, if you look at it, tier 1, if you have 25 years of service, you can retire. Tier 2, you cannot retire until you get 62 years of age. You cannot start receiving retirement income.
Is that when they were hired? Go ahead, I didn't know.
No, go ahead.
That cutoff date, is that when they were hired? If they were hired, caught up in the cuts, and then rehired, which one does it go to?
That's a good question.
That was the first time.
Hired for the first time, I think, was it? That's why, the hard questions.
But even tier one, though, you keep retiring to 60. You could have 25 years and wait until 60.
I have 34.
It says or after
Or
25.
after 25 years.
Yeah, I believe you can. You can retire before 60.
Yeah, that's your saying.
For tier one, yeah. So if you were hired before January 1st, so, you know, for example, say you're
old.
Like, for example, if you're a teacher coming out of college, you're 23 years old, and you work for 25 years, you get to 48 years old, well, technically, if you were tier one, you could retire at that point in time. Now, new teachers coming out of college, they start, say they're 23 years old, they gotta work 40 years before they can start pulling down their, retirement. So, and we wonder why we don't have as many, you know, kids going into education statewide.
Why you can't find science and math teachers.
Right.
And all those stuff. They got to get $10,000 signing bonus, which, would be enforced in a year, but we can't do that. But I'm just saying, that's the need, science and math, right, that number.
We talked about the employer, cost of PDIP. Let's talk about the employee cost of PDIP. So I'm sure everyone has heard that it's changed a lot, for this next school year. So I want to emphasize, this is state PDIP board changes. Our local board of education has nothing to do with this. This is set on the statewide level, okay? Single employee rates, this is what is deducted from employee paychecks, is what they have to pay, has doubled, gone from $15 per month to $30 a month. Family coverage rates have increased from $177 per month to $207 per month without a spouse. Now, if you have a spouse that's not part in PDIP, you have $100 a month surcharge to that, so then it goes up to $307 per month. Wellness premium is where the PDIP ladies go and they prick your finger and they tell you how unhealthy you are, and then make you go through a kind of wellness coaching deal. And so when you go through all of that, you can apply for a $50 a month waiver for you, and then your spouse has to do it if you're on that as well. So if you don't do that, that's another $50 for you and your spouse that gets tacked onto there. Monthly tobacco premiums, if you use tobacco, you get an additional $50 per month tacked on. If your spouse uses, you get an additional $50 per month. So if you and your spouse use, you get $100 per month. Family dental is $50 per month. The single dental rate remained the same, $38 per month. So you can see this is a very significant rate increase for employees. So just to kind of show you an example, and you know, this is kind of, you know, looking at this example was kind of my situation right now. So say you have a non-smoking family coverage plan with a spouse and dental, and you went through and got your wellness premium waiver. So it's going to increase from $227 per month to $357 per month. So that's $130 per month increase, or 57% per month increase in what you'll be paying, or $1,500 more per year than what you'll be paying. And that's assuming that you do the wellness waiver and you don't use tobacco.
We reward you for doing all
Yeah.
With
So if you don't do your wellness and you use tobacco, you're getting close to $500 a month if you have family coverage, including the spouse. So significant increases on the employee side as well. Unfortunately, I think it's kind of like a broken record every year. They're 40 million, 200 million in the hole, and they go through the battle in the legislative process to try to get more money allocated. And this is kind of where we are.
Mr. John, look at those. I know that's a lot of money to a lot of people. When you compare those kind of rates to private sector rates, I mean, I'd kill to pay private.
I know when I was in the private sector, I was young, but you know, I think I paid $400 a month. I didn't have any kids, and I had like a $1,200 copay. Or you had to meet in order for it to start kicking in. It was insanely high. So I was thrilled when I came to this was when it's all different. So it's
It doesn't make it better, it's just.
But it's always been
And
a
the
part of
idea
that.
was
You
that
go, your salary
your
is,
salary, yeah.
right,
And
and
then
you start off with
so
$30,000 a year, at least you have benefit. And that,
That used to be the whole way you get people to work for state government,
Yeah.
is for the benefits, which is slowly fading away, as we can see. All right, jumping over to debt service, we see our, now our 2007 bonds, we see our refunded, the 2012 refunded to 2005. Majority of the 2007 was refunded into the 2015. This is what we're paying on, and principal and interest payments for the pooled state warrants. We got a couple months left in the bus lease, and this is some of our lease payments for some of our server equipment right there. You're probably like, this looks really funny right here, and this is very kind of complicated kind of answer, but I'll tell it. The reason why there's no principal payments here, and there's higher interest as opposed to here, is that there were a few warrants that remained outstanding in the Series 2007 bond that have a 2017 callable date, which they were not included in the 2015 refi amount. So those principal payments will start for the 2015 once they get through that short-term callable date. That's why it kind of looks a little skewed, as it will start at 18 once it passes that 10-year callable date. That's very confusing. I'm going to go to the next slide. Clear as mud, right? Okay. Tony, this is answering your question. This is looking at our long-term debt payments. This is looking at our local and state bonds. This is kind of very deceiving right here. This is one of our, I think it's either Q's, I think it's Q's out and Q's out, both have balloon payments at the end of that bond. And so in order to avoid paying a balloon payment, we are paying into escrow each month. So it's going to look big on our books, but it's not going to, we've already been getting that on a monthly basis to the state to pay that. Okay, so looking at this, 2029, 2030, or 2005, 2012 refunded bond will be paid off. We will drop down here, and then in 2037, 2038, our 2007 refunded 2015 bond will drop off. So 2038, all of our local debt will be paid off.
So significant debt won't be repaid till 2028, 29.
Between 2005 and 2007, I mean, we took out, close to $250 million in debt for capital projects. For that most.
How soon, I know that a lot of those have dates at which, it allows us to pay it off sooner if we have that ability. When is the next time frame coming up where we could potentially?
So that goes into my whole callable date.
Yeah, 2018.
We'll have some in 2007 that we'll be able to pay off once we get past that callable date. And then, when we refi, you can only refi one time. And when you refi, you extend that 10-year period. But as with interest rates as low as they are right now, we're not in any position to pay off those balances. I mean, that was the best thing we could do in the current environment. Try to reduce our interest rates. Looking at capital maintenance projects, like I said, we have a lot of projects that are rolling over from that were included in last year's budget that we just didn't get time to get to. So they're going to be rolling over into the 2017 budget. That's most of the projects that you see on this page. And I'm not going to go line by line, but it's here. In case you want to look at that. Some of our newer projects that we've added into the budget, we're going to do about $1 million upgrade to fire alarm systems, which is a lot more intensive of a process than I ever thought it was. When we have to put wiring inside the walls and all those kind of things. We're also adding and doing additional chiller and HVAC and boiler replacement at some of those schools that have been added for FY17, plus looking at some roof replacements at CF Taylor and Somerdale. I think they're very similar designs there. So about $6.5 million when we look at our big maintenance projects that we have on the budget for this 2017. Like we all know, also included in that is this year is the pay-as-you-go phase 1. And you know, the Alberta Elementary School costs dropped down because the bid came in lower than the original budget. And then we have the other 4 projects here that I believe will be breaking ground on everything this fall. So these are rolling over. They were included in 16 and rolling over in 17 because it took forever to get the design and approval from the state. Also, as we discussed last week, some of our additional pay-as-you-go projects with the classroom addition at Spanish High School and gym, Daphne East, the 14 room, and addition at Magnolia Elementary has been added in this fiscal year's budget. Cecil, you asked last week, can you give me a list of how do we get the money for the pay-as-you-go program? So that's what I've done here. So I've kind of hit some of the highlights there. First thing, no more computer lease payments, representing about $7.5 million per year in savings that are removed with capital projects. I know Mr. Tyler mentioned that, you know, one of the things that we made every single central office department cut their budget this year, cut it by at least 5%, some of them fell a lot more than that. When you tally that all up together, it came out $1.9 million. We didn't put any maintenance, including the superintendents, the assistant superintendents, mine, HR, communications, technology, Loxley, you know, anyone with the local funded budget said cut it. That tallied up, so that went to help the fund as you go. We absorbed 19.5 locally funded teachers in the state foundation unit. That resulted in about $2.9 million in savings that we use for capital projects. State OCE funding, when you factor in the 4% raise, we saw about $500,000 increase. That allowed us to move locally funded people into state funded, freed up locally funds to go for the pay-as-you-go program. Refinancing our 2007 bond, that's $300,000 in interest savings in this next fiscal year. That's about $583,000 in interest savings from 2018 all the way to 2033. And our total realized savings from that refi was $10.4 million over that period. We also, the 10-year bus lease, that's paid off. So before we were having to use a majority of our state fleet renewal funding to pay the lease payments. And so since we don't have those lease payments, we're able to use state fleet renewal funding to buy new buses. So we're not having to put as much locally funds into it as we have in the past. That's $1.6 million. I don't have a dollar figure here, but you know, we're estimating we have a lot. If you look at this budget compared to the last 3 years, we have a lot fewer HVAC, roof, and boiler repair expenses, and that's really due to the investment of funds in our current facility. We probably invested over $20 million over the last 3 years, working on roofs, working on HVAC, working on boilers, working on all those type of things for our existing facilities. So when knowing that we have updated mechanicals in those schools allows us to use more of our local and state sources that were used in the past to get us caught up. Now we use for new construction. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Estimated revenue, 1% sales tax. If we just look at this, you know, estimated to be $36 million. We got about $32 million looking at all of the positions and the supplements. You know, that's about $4 million, you know, taking advantage of our sales tax increase that we can move over to capital projects. So, you know, summary, you know, how did we get to the pay-as-you-go program? We create efficiencies, we cut expenditures, and we utilize local revenue increases to get the funding necessary to try to do a pay-as-you-go. And it's really technically not a pay-as-you-go, it's really a pay-as-you-go, which is even slower than a pay-as-you-go. Unfortunately, you know, we're not able to build, you know, new school buildings, but at least it allows us the ability to expand our current facilities. Okay, general fund budget. Yeah, this is where all the operational funds are coming from. Looking at it, we're, you know, looking at our ending fund balance in the general fund, we're at $45.9 million at the end of 2017. That gives us a healthy 2-month operating reserve balance in the general fund. And then, I know that was a lot of information and a lot of data, and I know a lot of people probably feel like this. But the presentation's over. So now we'll kind of any questions, concerns. We have public input sheets for anyone who'd like to fill it out. Any written questions, or any questions in general will be answered in the second budget hearing, which is really just a matter of addressing any concerns or questions at the September work session at Fairfield High School.
Well, John, one point before we start our board. This is an early stage of stage 1, where John and myself have talked, we've got almost $2 million cuts going into this year from everyone's budget. So that I know that will face a drop in budget, but that process has started with John and myself saying, 5% will be taken from everybody's budget, which is the beginning. So you'll be getting more and more of this as we get into the year. Get everybody settled.
I know we're ready to go. One comment on the pay-as-you-go system, pay what you got system. Of course, I overanalyze everything, but I thought what we're going forward with is some of the largest schools in the state. All our schools are just getting bigger and bigger. We can't build new ones. Daphne, which is, going to be 1,100 students. One of the largest elementary schools in the state. And that's just what we see all over. So it's getting away from community schools. That's what we're relegated to. It's what it is.
John, it's a fantastic breakdown. I know you boiled it down for us non-bean counters.
Except that one page.
Yeah, we got that.
I didn't write that one down.
The all-star cast that you have working with you, you have a stellar cast of every school I go to, bookkeepers, principals, everybody singing praises of everyone in your staff, Don, Patsy. They're singing praise of everybody. So they do a stellar job. And just the general public doesn't realize the dollar figures that we operate with to educate children. And it's just staggering. I think our teachers and staff are doing more with less. They're turning out great products with less.
I will say too, Mr. Tyler, to your credit, not every school board has these kind of numbers available to them. We're one of the fortunate few that I believe that have a handle on where our expenses are and have good guidance.
We're working on it.
I'll take on that just a minute, John. I appreciate it so much. Of course, we can get into more after the second year, but I called him early. I might have woke him up Saturday morning. I didn't know it because he said call. But
He's not a morning person.
well, I tried to text and he didn't go through, so I called him. And it went to voicemail. He called me right back. Anyhow, it was kind of early. It was coffee drinking time, but one of our mayoral candidates is in the store in the room about the 3-meal overlay, 3-meal special tax district. And we thought we knew the answer, but I wanted him to hear it directly from the source, because the rumor was beginning to take sprout wings and all that, and Johnny on the spot and answered that, and I feel very confident, very comfortable being able to call him at any time, day or night, and get that kind of response, and you can squelch some of this stuff we deal with.
I know this was a long presentation, I know it was tired, and it's really a lot of information. We're trying to cover everything from people to food, to buses, to debt, to Bon Jovi.
John, this is good information as we go
Go
forward.
system-wide.
As we go forward, as I go forward, it's great information for me, especially in the next one after we hammer everything down and get it off the state. Because it's very understandable explanations of dollar expenditures. And I challenge those out there who want to continue to do harm to the children of Baldwin County based on these are bogus numbers, these are wrong figures. You know, where did you get this? You inflated this, you haven't included that. I mean, it's really sad. You know, the numbers are here. You're not gonna go to jail just to appease some political, machine, you know, so, and I'm not either. So, this is great information to continue to go forward to preach our message.
You know, like every number I release publicly is checked and double checked. I mean, that's the auditor in me. You know, I work for the largest accounting firm in the world. Everything we did went through, you know, 5 different levels of review, and if you made one little mistake, it won't catch it. So you always have to make sure you have backup for every single number that you put in. That's kind of ingrained in me. So, if you've got any questions, we've got the backup data there to back it up. Every number there.
If somebody wants to listen.
That's right.
Everyone listen.
That's right.
Thank you.
Good job.
Don't call John 4-7.
What was?
All right, so we still have another meeting, what,
That's
special
Tuesday.
board meeting?
That's the
Tuesday,
personnel.
Personnel here? Yes.
4 o'clock, yes, 8 o'clock, you're on. Thank you.